How's everybody doing? We awake still? I know lunch is coming up, so I'll take as long as I can. No, I'm just kidding. So let me introduce myself because I only recognize a couple faces in here. Matt Rantanen. I am partnering in business development for Arcadian Infracom, and I've spent the last 19 years in Southern California working with 20 federally recognized tribes as the director of technology, building high-speed wireless microwave, supporting library schools, Head Starts, kids on the ground, people in their homes, and continue to work with them on a ongoing basis in policy and things across the United States. As it says there, it's kind of hard to read, but I'm also the co-chair of the National Congress of American Indians Tech and Telecom Subcommittee, where all the policy sort of generates from in Indian country. There's 360 member tribes there, and if there's issues on the ground, we develop policy into resolution. It's passed by 360 tribes. It moves on to the Hill in DC, and it through the FCC and different places like that. I'm the former chairman of the board of Native Public Media, 2 terms, and I'm currently the vice chair there. I sit on the board of American Indian Policy Institute at Arizona State University, and I advise the Western Governors Association on the tribal and rural broadband as well. It's actually where I just came from. I was in Vail yesterday speaking with them, and a few other things. I advise the the California Broadband Council on essentially everything to do with tribal and some rural broadband aspects that are in the state of California. We help their first responders network as well as their Office of Emergency Services. And I'm sure I'm forgetting another thing, but that kind of gives you a little bit of background on me. I'm Cree from Alberta area, Canada. Family's been in the US for 124 years. I also am part Viking and Finnish, as my last name says. So got a weird variety there, but Northern warrior type. So we'll go over some of this stuff today. I'll try to keep it fun. There's quite a few topics to talk about when we're crossing the communication deserts. Most of the corporations and even the governments look at communication deserts as off the United States continent, and they tend to do work off the United States continent trying to solve these problems, where in the last 10 years, a lot of the tribal folks, myself included, have really tried to focus the US government and some of the bigger corporations inward towards the United States reservation system, as well as some of the most rural settings in the US. Because we have those same communication technology deserts here, they're just overlooking that fact, and they're moving offshore to do demonstration projects when we could do a lot of demonstration projects right in our own backyard. So rural connectivity. So I'm not sure where you're from. It's going to take a while to figure out. But if you've driven across the US and you've ended up in a rural spot where you looked all the way around you and you couldn't find any people, you probably didn't have cell service if you weren't on a major US highway. So I'm sure then if you turned off on a side road from the road you were on and started to find rural housing, you would realize how much they didn't have access to the thing that we play with all day long in our networks, and that is access to broadband and access to communications. So the rural US has a big issue with lack of connectivity, and if you look, an average rural income is $52,000 per household. That's not per person. So there's a need for work, I would assume. There is probably a need for some funding to be able to pay for something like broadband to come to their house, and then as well computer equipment and things to be able to use it. Just like tribal, which I'll jump across, it's basically very similar because the tribes are all in rural America, except for those random tribes that happen to be in Palm Springs or adjacent to a major city. They're all in rural settings, and There's 573 federally recognized tribes spread out throughout the United States. The lower 48 has right around 325 reservations. And at the top bullet point there, 8,000 miles of middle mile fiber is missing to connect those reservations. And I know that because during the last administration, I was working with the CTO of the US, and we were identifying why tribes had such a hard time, a barrier to entry to getting access to just the basic fiber it would need to backhaul to the rest of the network. So we worked with a lot of the carriers in the United States and got all of their mapping and laid it over the reservation system, and we were able to identify that there are truly 8,000 middle mile fibers missing in this component. So even if they were to have a network internal to their reservation, they don't have any way to transport out, right? So they're very reliant upon microwave in this situation. Fiber infrastructure is hard to build, especially hard for tribes to build when it's not on their tribal land, when they're having to navigate county land to get services to them. Return on investment's not there for a carrier to build it, not enough bodies. Biggest reservations, Navajo in the lower 48, and there's 300,000 enrolled members, but they only have about 130,000 members that live on the reservation. So that's still not enough people, and it's way spread out to be able to return investment on the design of how they need to recover costs for infrastructure. And if you see there's also a lot of situations where there's no cell service, and 30% of the tribal households don't have plain old telephone service, so can't dial 911 from the house. So the real problem in the rural communities, as well as the tribal communities in getting this. And we've seen rates up to $1,000 a megabit still. I mean, I remember when T1 was 1,200 a 1.5. This was about 20 years ago, and then it should have come down, but we're still seeing some $1,000 price tags today per meg. So it's kind of cost prohibitive to get involved. So tribes are very dependent on microwave. This is a picture of a tower from the Tribal Digital Village Network in Southern California. And you can see the terrain. The green valley that's beyond the tower in the picture is where the reservation is, where the people live. The tower is up on the mountaintop. Geography is very diverse. Building fiber through systems like that is very tough. Hanging on poles sounds like a great idea until you remember Southern California burns down every year, if you haven't seen the news. So luckily wireless doesn't burn down as often, and the firefighters tend to know where these sit, so when they're threatened, they know who provides their internet, so they typically bomb that with the red stuff that keeps them alive. That one's been painted red before. We actually went up to take care of it afterwards and clear off our solar panels, and we found it washed. We're like, whoa, and they, in their spare time, they had washed it back off because they wanted their internet. Pretty cool. You know, they're probably on Amazon or something, you know, buying stuff for the station. So microwave tends to be a stopgap a lot of times for a fiber solution in these kind of situations, where tribes have gotten fairly good access to E-rate and things like that to get funding to bring middle mile fiber onto the reservation. It takes a long time, right? Fiber builds take time. So to build out something so that the people can use it right away, microwave tends to step into the picture at that point. It solves a lot of geographically diverse problems. And for the bottom point there, the tribal historic aspect. So tribes have sort of a history of not being able to track some of their artifacts and things because they were moved around so much by the United States government. So they have a real tough time, and then when they did track stuff, people then took that information that they recorded and destroyed it. So they don't have a lot of record where some of this stuff is, and they're very sensitive about you trenching across the middle of the reservation because it could be a grave site, could be, you know, historical sacred site of any measure, and then it could be just artifacts that they would want to save if they were run into. So there's a little tough situation there, and so other companies moving in across reservation have to be sensitive to those things, and typically you run into companies that aren't that sensitive when it comes to that stuff. And example A, 20 years ago, everybody built the fiber network to go as fast as they could go, east, west, and a couple of north-souths. To get money, the business model was dollars per linear foot of fiber in the ground, right? So every mile they built, they got more money, they got more money. So the faster they built across the US, the more money they got, the higher the value of their company. And they built huge networks, but they avoided everything that would slow them down across the way, right? What gets in the way? Grand Canyon's in the way. Go around the Grand Canyon. What's this? Rocky Mountains. Go around that. What's this? Indian reservation. We don't know how to deal with that. We'll just go around those. We'll just skip all of them. They look like trouble. We'll keep moving. Also, tribes, because of the relationships they've had with the carriers in the past, wanting to just use eminent domain or some sort of easement blast through your reservation, they have a weird sordid past with these people, so they kind of feel like they're bullies. So they typically throw up things like a price tag of $1 million a mile for right away on their reservation, which is really a sign of, don't talk to me anymore, go away. So we've seen a lot of that kind of stuff happen. But it created, where the red circles are, giant communication deserts, right? So no connectivity to any value of throughput there to be able to tie it back into the system. So there's a little bit more of how that came to that. So carrier metrics, you know how the carriers make their money, right? They got to sell products to people. And they've sold us all our products, basically, right? We all have that smartphone, we all have that computer, we all have that stuff, and it's all connected to our system. What else are they going to sell us? They're looking at communities, in rural communities, that they don't have enough numbers to bring, it doesn't even make sense to even drive out there to find out if there's enough numbers for them to make their money. So there's no way for them to do anything new, like fill in those communication deserts by building across that. The carriers they're too leveraged. And they're strapped to business concepts of content provision now and shifting gears into, film production and becoming a content player, which are absorbing some of their free spend dollars. And they don't actually have the money to build out anymore in capacity. They typically just lease from everyone. So they also have some strained relationships with the rights-of-way owners. As I said, the relationships with the tribes. Carriers used to tend to build with railway as well, and I don't know, there's a horrible history with railroads and tribes. I don't know how many of you know, but at one point, one of the rail companies used bulldozers to push burial mounds over to make the raised ground to put the tracks on. So, there's a little American Horror Story for you. So a positive change in market dynamics, right? So the content players are now the drivers, right? Everybody is at the top of that content food chain. You all know who you are. Some of you are in the room. I see you. You're dictating where the fiber is going to go. You're also looking for new fiber paths, right? You don't want to go down that same old path. What if a bulldozer chops that thing in half and then everybody goes down? Everybody goes down because they're all in the same hole. So it's time to build new routes. It's time to build new opportunities. And it's obviously time to, build a bunch more data centers because data is king at the moment. So they're driving, not the carriers are driving, right? So we're looking at situations where how fast can that cat picture propagate from here to Russia? And and if there's not enough fiber diversity or there's a faulty path in the system, that cat picture may not make it to Russia or to China or to Australia as fast as we want our friends that are over there to see it. So we need to get creative, and we need to build some new paths. A new positive change is that tribes are now understanding the value of broadband. Before they were just like, no, communication companies don't cross our reservations. We don't want to deal with you. Now they're like, how do we get broadband? Because broadband, unbeknownst to them, is as important now as electricity and water. They have a real bad problem with tribal youth actually getting educated, coming off reservation to go to university, and never coming home, because they could never execute any of the degrees that they get in the university where they live. So they stay away from home. So they're losing this massive educated portion of their population, and their reservation systems being depleted. Cultural leaders who used to say, no, we don't want internet for our kids. We can't police it, can't make sure they're not on porn, we can't make sure they're not gambling, we can't make sure of these things, we don't know how to do that, are now saying, hey Matt, how do we bring the internet in and entice them back home? How do we bring them home? Because we're losing some of our cultural leaders that go get educated. We can't even continue our cultural stuff without those kids staying home. So there's a big shift there, and I think it's a positive shift, and there's a big component of how to manage your digital footprint, which we're helping in the process with tribes to understand like how better to use the internet to be protected. So let's see. So the first step obviously is the hardest. It looks like that's awesome. So I was wondering if this would happen. This tends to happen on the jumping between systems. The map has shifted up. So Phoenix is at the bottom of that Y, okay? And then the top left goes to Salt Lake City, top right goes to Denver, which it seems to be landing on Denver. The middle of that is no man's land, because that circle exists from our previous map. There was never anything built there. And the left side of that map, like I said before, Grand Canyon. Nobody could get through that, and you still can't, not legally, unless you have Evel Knievel drag a cable over the top. Oh, he's dead. So we have on the right side, we have the Rocky Mountains, and those are really tough to build through, and you got about 3 months a year when it's not covered in snow. And then right down the middle of that big circle is the Navajo Nation. And the Navajo Nation was $1 million a mile. So nobody was going to build down the middle of that. So that left this giant hole in the United States where nobody has access. So there's 130,000 Native Americans on that reservation. There's probably another 130,000 rural customers that live adjacent to that reservation in that area, just in the center. Let alone you get down towards Phoenix in the rural setting, you're near Flagstaff, Tuba City, all those different places. You're actually around a lot of rural customers. So this is the first time that someone is building this kind of a solve for the system. So Arcadian Infracom, the company I'm doing partnering in business development for, this is our first announced route. So it's going to connect those 3 major data center cities. It is going to bring approximately 300 miles of fiber through the Navajo Nation, providing them with dark fiber, with lit services, and with money. And it converges 3 new fiber paths in one place in the middle of that Y, where there's ample water, there's tons of power. I'm thinking data center. So these are the types of opportunities that we need to see in the market, and these are the things that we need to change as far as the demographic, what we're looking at. We need to fill up these little, they call them white spaces, but now everybody's using TV white spaces, so that doesn't really work. But communication deserts in the middle of all these voids, right? So, full diversity, right? Completely new routes, going different locations, still connecting cities that we already connect, but you don't have to go all the way down here, across the bottom and back up to get there. You can actually go straight. Working with rights-of-way owners that previously weren't interested, and now are very interested. The benefit of this type of a build is, if you are building for giant customer A, you know who that is, and you're connecting their 2 data centers together, as long as you hit a latency that is respectable within their parameters, nobody cares if that line goes over to Middle America, Little Town Z, Reservation 1, and it can scoot around a little bit all the way through your rights of way and connect and leave opportunities access to that fiber path all along the route and open up the rural opportunities for all the small carriers, all the middle carriers, all the tribes that want to build for themselves. Little town USA, like Ammon, Idaho. I was just in Vail yesterday, and the technology director of Ammon, Idaho, they have a gigabit service for $26 a month. Every home has access to that in Ammon, Idaho. $26 for a gig, symmetrical. So these are the opportunities that will come off of this type of a build. So creating new partnerships. Department of Transportation, I mean, there's a lot of smart business going on in cars these days, and pretty soon it's going to be really smart because there won't be humans driving. Obviously, we're working with townships, power providers, rural co-ops, and tribal nations. So the benefits to the people: workers, local workers. Fiber needs to be maintained. Data centers need to be maintained. Local jobs in communities that don't normally have a job center. Fees for rights of way, right? There's funding there for paying for the rights of way for some of these organizations, some of these tribes. Educational impact. Connecting all the schools and libraries. Even if they're already connected, connecting them at a greater capacity so they actually can function in what we're doing today in education. Distance learning. My kids, I lived the last 10 years, minus the last year, without internet at the house. I bought a Verizon modem, I plugged it into a cradle point router, and I blasted it through my house so my kids could do homework, and paid through the nose for that service to make sure the kids could have access. But now, this distance learning opportunity is huge, right? So they're going to have access at their house. They're going to be able to dial into tutoring services at the local university, get math help, get science help. There's actually been some things done on the reservations where they'll come out with a biologist and they'll have a test kit and they'll test the running water that's in the stream, but they'll put it on the internet so that the kids that can't be there from different reservations are able to participate, ask questions. It's bidirectional. Really cool stuff. So coding, software coding, app development, you name it, it's huge. There's coding camps happening in urban centers all the time. Native American kids hear about that and want to be part of it. They don't have access. Some of the smartest kids out there don't have access to coding. There's a scary thing happening in artificial intelligence. If you are not involved in the development of the AI brain, computer brain, you're effectively going to become extinct by that brain, that AI, right? So if Native Americans aren't contributing to the programming of the AI, then they will effectively not be visible to the AI in the future. Because the programmers that are doing it now aren't aware of the subtle nuances that make you Native American sometimes, or the differences that you are, I'm different than you in society. So some of those things are kind of scary. So getting tribal kids into coding camps with our partners, big corporations that want to bring a bunch of kids into coding, this is a great opportunity. And when fiber comes into that space, they have every opportunity to be able to do that out on the reservation. So social impact is, I think somewhat obvious. Everybody will have social media. Oh no, not that social impact. It provides opportunity, right? It provides opportunity for education, for job search, for health. It creates better community, more solidified community, happier community, access to information. And I gotta say, everybody bags on networks because, all you're doing is feeding Netflix to everybody. That's all your network is worth. And 82% of our network in Southern California is Netflix. But if you have to take all the kids and the parents in the family into the one family vehicle and drive an hour to town and spend over $100 at the movie theater to be able to get entertained and eat up a 4-hour block of your life, I'm all for supporting 82% of Netflix going to rural communities because it gives people access to entertainment at their home. They don't have to take a risk or spend an exorbitant amount of money to get out of the reservation just to see a movie. Provides a little bit of hope. These kids, especially the bigger reservations, there's no jobs, there's no opportunities. They get past high school and then they sit and they don't know what to do. A lot of them don't have a road out to get higher education. They just don't know where to go or what to do. And now with this opportunity coming in, they see the ability to telecommute for Google, telecommute for Facebook, telecommute for anybody. Do product support for Amazon, all kinds of different stuff. Or just write really cool reviews. So benefits for the partners. Obviously it's middle mile fiber from the backbone to the last mile provider. So there's a lot of last mile providers out there that have really, really bad access to the middle mile, and it's probably super expensive. This brings a whole new cost structure into that market and allows people to build way more and grow way more. Fiber to towers, obviously for the last talk, 5G, gotta have fiber. Increased federal grant program opportunities because there will be actual access to supplement. Economic development zones. As soon as that fiber comes in there, here comes the economic development. It just happens. We've seen it in Southern California on Tribal Digital Village Network, and we'll see it with Navajo as the fiber gets built out. So how do you help? Again, code camps, hardware and software, donations, refurbs. We got a bunch of firms just giving up their computer every 3 years. We'll give it to us. We'll get it into the Native American communities, that kind of a thing. There's programs for that. Remote entry-level jobs. Personal outreach, community outreach. Big corporations have a department for this. And if you're looking to do this kind of outreach, there's a place in the US right next to you, just a 50-minute drive or an hour-and-a-half drive that really needs this level of support and would be a great place for you to support, as well as it'll be reciprocal. It'll be, you'll have a job force that's curious and interested about your corporation. And that would end. Does anybody have any questions? What's for lunch? Is that the first question? Yeah.
One quickie, Mari Silby with US Ignite. What's your funding model for the current build-out that you're talking about?
So the fiber build-out is infrastructure fund, folks, private.
Private.
Yeah. It's not quick flip Wall Street, it's not government, it's private funding. Yes.
Hi, Celeste Anderson from USC. How close is your fiber build to the Navajo Technical University?
It's a ways off, but so there's a huge dynamic that's going to change on Navajo, and the technical universities are without, good bandwidth at the moment. So NTUA, who is our partner on the Navajo Nation, we work with the nation, and that's their vehicle to deliver services on the reservation, has been killed in the price of bandwidth that they have to pay for. So they have to pass that on to customers. It's a horrible scenario. We're going to bring in opportunity that will dramatically lower their cost to entry on everything. Should just open up the door for new opportunities for the technical universities. I know that the technical universities, I actually just spoke at WestNet and talked to, I think, all of the universities that are on Navajo, and we talked about solutions and opportunities that are going to change there. So they're looking at different angles to be able to tie into this. I know that there's potentially even a collaboration of carriers right now that are joining together to build fiber with one of those universities. So
Great.
Things are definitely changing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Geez, I'm 2 for 2 on this. Rob Seastrom asking a question on my own behalf. IPv4 addresses are expensive. Carrier grade NAT is a constrained resource. What's your IPv6 story like?
That is for the engineer. IPv6 is nothing to be afraid of, obviously. I mean, it's going to be the future.
Is it the future today?
Well, this is 3 years out, right? This is lit in 2022. So sure, that's the future today. I mean, we're going to be 400 gig waves by then, so we should be IPv6 by then, right?
Well,
I don't know that for sure, but I can answer. I can follow up. with you.
we can talk later, but if you're not,
Here,
if it's not part of
talk to this brainiac. Here's the president.
Oh, okay, great. Hi.
So real quick, we're not a service provider, so we're just doing infrastructure. It is fiber, 100 and 400 gig waves, that's it. So our partners.
You partnered with other service providers.
Exactly.
Okay, great.
All the carriers, we want to leave meat on the bone for them. Their services they provide will be V4 and V6.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Derek. So last slide I forgot was up here. Derek, who just spoke, likes to make fun that I'm friends with Slayer, and I had to prove it on the slide. It was written up in the actual write-up in the magazine for the thing, so I had to go there. So I appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Matt.